It was a chilly evening when the small-town music school buzzed with excitement. Students were rushing around with their sheet music, fixing their outfits and whispering about who would play what. Everyone seemed to know each other, greeting their friends and laughing in groups. Among them sat a quiet young woman named Lena. She was sitting in the corner of the hall, her hands gently folded in her lap, a nervous look in her eyes as she waited for her turn to rehearse. She wasn't dressed like the others. While most students wore shiny shoes and bright dresses, Lena wore a simple gray dress and old shoes that had clearly been worn many times before. Her hair was tied neatly but not styled in the fancy way others had done theirs. She didn't care much for looks. She had come only to play the piano, but that's exactly what made her stand out, and not in a good way. Some of the students noticed her sitting quietly and started whispering among themselves. "Who's she?" one girl said with a little laugh. "She doesn't even look like she belongs here." "I heard she works as a cleaner in the same building," another replied, rolling her eyes. "What's she doing in a music performance night?" Their laughter was soft, but Lena heard it. She kept her eyes down, pretending she didn't notice. She had grown used to this kind of talk. People always judged her for how she looked, never knowing what she carried inside her heart. Lena had joined the music school only a few months ago. She couldn't afford private lessons, but she had convinced the school's director to let her practice in the evenings after her janitor shift. She cleaned the hallways, dusted the instruments, and then stayed behind for an hour or two when the building was empty. She would sit at the old piano by the window and play softly, her fingers moving like they remembered something far away. She didn't know if anyone ever listened, and she didn't really care. Playing was the only time she felt close to her mother again. Her mother had been a piano teacher once, a kind, warm woman who used to hum as she played. When Lena was little, she would sit beside her mother on the piano bench, watching her fingers dance across the keys. She didn't understand the notes then, but she understood the feeling. The way her mother smiled, the way the room filled with peace. That peace disappeared when her mother passed away. Lena was only 12 at the time, too young to understand the weight of losing someone who had given her the love of music. After that, life became about survival. She worked part-time jobs, studied when she could, and barely had time to dream. The piano stayed silent for years, until one day while cleaning the school hall, she saw it again. The same model of piano her mother once played. Her hands trembled as she pressed the first key. The sound was slightly off tune, but something inside her stirred. That single note reminded her of everything she had forgotten. From that day on, she started practicing again. Not for attention, not for praise, but to feel alive. When the school announced its annual performance night, Lena hesitated. The event was meant to showcase the best students. She wasn't one of them. She didn't even have a teacher. She learned by watching videos, reading books, and remembering what her mother had taught her. But when she walked past the sign-up sheet one day, something made her stop. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen and wrote her name down, small and quiet among all the confident signatures. Now, sitting in the rehearsal hall, she wondered if it had been a mistake. The piano instructor, Mr. Hampton, walked around the hall with his clipboard, checking the students' names. He stopped when he saw Lena sitting in the corner. "Ah, you're Lena, right?" he said, frowning slightly. "Yes, sir," she said softly. "I wasn't expecting you to participate," he said. "You're still learning, aren't you?" Lena nodded, not wanting to argue. Mr. Hampton sighed. "Well, I hope you've practiced. The performance will be judged by local musicians and sponsors. It's a serious event." "I understand," she said quietly. He gave a short nod and moved on, muttering something under his breath that sounded like, "This should be interesting." The whispers began again after he left. A boy sitting near the piano smirked. "Maybe she'll play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few laughed. Lena's cheeks burned, but she didn't respond. Instead, she took a deep breath and focused on the piano. Her mother used to say, "Don't answer noise with noise. Let your music speak for you." That night, after rehearsal, the hall emptied slowly. The students left in groups, laughing and making plans for the performance night. Lena stayed behind to clean the room. She picked up the leftover papers, arranged the chairs, and dusted the piano. When she finished, she sat down in front of it. The moonlight slipped through the tall windows, falling across the piano keys like silver ribbons. For a moment, she closed her eyes and imagined her mother sitting beside her again. "Play from your heart," she could almost hear her say. Lena placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The notes were gentle, rising and falling like waves. There was sadness in them, but also hope, like the sound of someone finding their way home after being lost for a long time. She didn't notice that someone was standing at the door listening. It was the janitor from the night shift, an older man who had seen her many times before. He never interrupted her when she played. He just leaned on his mop and listened quietly. When she stopped, he clapped softly. "That was beautiful," he said with a kind smile. "You play like someone who's telling a story." Lena blushed. "Thank you," she whispered. "You'll be fine," he said. "Don't worry about what people say. When you sit there and play, they'll forget every word they laughed about." She smiled at him, grateful for his kindness, but deep inside she still felt nervous. She knew she didn't have the confidence or the appearance that people expected from a performer. She didn't have a fancy gown or a proud family cheering for her in the front row. All she had was her music and her mother's memory. The next day, during lunch break, she overheard some of the students talking again in the hallway. "Can you believe she's actually performing?" One girl said. "It's going to be so embarrassing." "She probably just wants attention," another added. "Wait until she starts, everyone will laugh." Lena stopped behind the door, listening quietly. Her hands tightened around the small piano pendant she always wore. It was her mother's. She whispered softly to herself, "For you, Mama. I'll play for you." That night she practiced longer than ever. She didn't have sheet music. The piece she was preparing was one she had created herself, a song born out of her memories, her struggles, and her love for her mother. Every note carried a piece of her life. By the time she finished, it was almost midnight. Her fingers ached, but her heart felt light. The night of the performance was only 2 days away. Posters were up all around the school, and the whole town was expected to attend. It was a big event. People came dressed up hoping to see the most talented students. Some even brought small gifts for their favorites. Lena didn't tell anyone she was performing. She didn't invite anyone either. She didn't think anyone would come just to see her. But in her heart, she knew that one person would be there, her mother, watching from somewhere unseen. On the morning of the performance, she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress. It was the same simple gray one, but she had washed and ironed it carefully. She tied her hair back and put on her mother's pendant. When she arrived at the hall, the other students were already there, glowing in their expensive clothes and makeup. They looked at her again, whispering like before. "She's really going to play," one boy said, shaking his head. "This is going to be interesting." Lena smiled softly to herself. They could laugh all they wanted. Soon it would be her turn, and when that moment came, she would let her music do the talking. She walked over to the piano, placed her bag beside it, and gently touched the keys. They felt cool and familiar, like an old friend. She whispered under her breath, "Let's do this." One more time. And as the noise of laughter echoed around her, Lena closed her eyes and silently promised herself that no matter what happened, she would play her truth for her mother and for the little girl who once dreamed beside her. The morning sun poured through the windows of the small apartment as Lena sat quietly at her table. Her fingers rested on her cup of tea, but her mind was far away. The day of the performance had finally arrived. After weeks of practice, fear, and whispers behind her back, this was it. The one moment she had been waiting for, and dreading at the same time. Her heart beat fast just thinking about standing in front of everyone. She wasn't afraid of playing. She was afraid of their eyes. The same eyes that had looked at her with doubt and laughter. She could already imagine them staring, waiting for her to make a mistake. She took a deep breath, whispering to herself, "Don't think about them. Just play." On the small shelf beside her bed sat an old photo of her mother, smiling while sitting at a piano. Lena touched the edge of the frame gently. "You'll be there with me, right?" she said softly. It gave her strength to believe that somehow her mother would hear her play tonight. After getting ready, she packed her few things, a small bottle of water, her mother's pendant, and the notebook where she had written her music. It wasn't full of notes and symbols like professional sheet music. Instead, it had words, feelings, little memories written beside each part of her song, her smile, the last goodbye, a quiet night. That was how Lena remembered what to play. Through emotion, not numbers or scales. When she reached the school hall, the place was already filled with noise and excitement. Decorations hung from the ceiling and the smell of flowers mixed with the faint scent of polished wood. Rows of chairs had been placed neatly and people were already taking their seats. Parents with cameras, children in bright dresses, and a few local reporters stood near the back. Lena felt her stomach tighten. She wished she could disappear for a moment just until it was her turn. Backstage, the performers gathered in groups, chatting and adjusting their outfits. She stood quietly in the corner, holding her notebook close. No one talked to her and she didn't mind. She was used to being alone. Then she heard a familiar voice behind her. "So you really came," said a boy with slicked hair and a shiny suit. He was one of the students who had laughed at her before. "Yes," Lena said calmly. He smirked. "Brave of you. But maybe next time start with a smaller crowd. Don't worry, though. Everyone loves a surprise. Maybe you'll surprise us with how bad it can get." He chuckled and walked away before she could reply. Lena looked down, her throat tight. For a second, she felt that old voice of doubt whisper inside her, telling her she didn't belong here. But she quickly brushed it away. "No, I've come too far to give up now." The lights dimmed slightly as the first performer took the stage. The sound of applause filled the hall. Lena peeked through the curtain and watched. The girl on stage played a complicated classical piece. The audience clapped loudly at the end. The next performer was even louder, adding flourishes and tricks just to impress the judges. Each one seemed to compete for attention. When it was almost her turn, Lena's hands grew cold. She rubbed them together slowly, trying to calm down. Her heart pounded in her chest. She could hear it louder than the music. The stage assistant called her name softly. "You're next." Lena nodded, took a deep breath, and walked toward the stage. Her shoes made a soft tapping sound on the wooden floor. As she stepped into the light, the room went quiet for a moment. Then a few whispers began. "Isn't that the cleaner's daughter?" someone murmured. "She doesn't look ready for this," another whispered. Lena heard every word, but she didn't look at anyone. She focused on the piano waiting for her in the center of the stage. It looked huge under the bright lights, shining beautifully. She walked slowly, her legs trembling slightly, and sat on the bench. The silence in the hall felt heavy. For a few seconds, she didn't move. She just sat there staring at the keys. Her reflection on the glossy surface showed her pale face and nervous eyes. She closed them gently and whispered inside, "This is for you, Mama." Her fingers touched the first key. The sound that came out was soft, so soft that for a moment, it was like a whisper in the air. Then came another note and another until a gentle melody began to fill the hall. It wasn't like the pieces the others played. It wasn't about showing skill or speed. It was about emotion. Each note carried warmth, pain, and love all at once. The melody rose and fell like a story being told without words. People stopped whispering. The laughter faded. The room was suddenly still, as if no one wanted to breathe too loudly and break the spell. The judges leaned forward, surprised. They hadn't expected this from the quiet girl who everyone had doubted. Lena's fingers moved naturally, flowing with feeling. She wasn't thinking about technique. She wasn't thinking about the crowd. She was remembering her mother. The way she used to hum while cooking, the way she used to laugh when Lena hit the wrong key, the day she said, "Play like your heart is speaking, not your hands." As the melody grew deeper, a few people in the audience began to tear up without knowing why. The music touched something inside them, something real and human. Near the back, the old janitor stood quietly, smiling proudly. He had told her she would be fine. Now he could see he had been right. When the final notes came, they were slow and peaceful, like the closing of a story. Lena's fingers rested gently on the last key, and the sound lingered for a few seconds before fading completely. There was silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Lena lowered her hands, thinking maybe they hadn't liked it. Maybe she had made a mistake. Her heart sank a little. She stood up, ready to leave the stage quietly. Then someone started clapping. It was just one person at first. Then another joined in. And another. Soon the entire room was on its feet, clapping loudly. Some even cheered. Lena froze in place, not sure what to do. She looked around, her eyes wide in disbelief. The same people who had laughed earlier were now clapping with awe on their faces. The applause grew louder. Mr. Hampton, the instructor who had doubted her, stood up from his seat, his mouth slightly open. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. He clapped too, slowly, almost in shame. Lena felt tears forming in her eyes. She bowed her head slightly, her hands trembling. The sound of the audience felt like a warm wave washing over her. For the first time, she felt truly seen. As she walked off the stage, people turned to each other, whispering things like, "That was incredible, and I didn't expect that at all." Behind the curtain, the stage assistant smiled at her. "You were amazing," he said softly. "Thank you," she whispered, wiping a tear from her cheek. She walked backstage where the other performers were waiting. The boy who had mocked her earlier avoided her eyes completely. Another girl walked up and said, "That was beautiful." "I've never heard something like that before." Lena smiled politely. She didn't feel proud in an arrogant way, just relieved, peaceful. Her mother's song had reached the world. That was enough. Later that night, when the performances ended and everyone started leaving, a few people came up to her to say kind words. Even Mr. Hampton approached her. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I was wrong to judge you. What you played tonight wasn't just music, it was art." Lena didn't know what to say. She just smiled and nodded. As the hall emptied, she sat alone at the piano for a moment, running her fingers across the keys one last time. The echoes of the applause still rang faintly in her ears. She thought about how she had once been too scared to sign up, too afraid of being laughed at. Now she understood what her mother had meant all along. When music is played with truth, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. People will feel it. She whispered softly, "We did it, Mama." The janitor appeared at the door again, giving her a thumbs up. "Told you," he said with a grin. Lena laughed quietly. "You were right." When she stepped out of the hall into the cool night air, the stars seemed brighter. She looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. The fear, the pain, the doubt, it all faded away. All that remained was the music still playing softly in her heart. She walked home slowly, her steps light, her spirit calm. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for now, she had done what she came to do. She had played her truth, and the world had listened. And in that moment, she wasn't just the quiet girl who cleaned classrooms or sat alone in corners. She was a musician, one who had finally found her voice. The next morning, Lena woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. She rubbed her eyes and reached for it, thinking it might be a reminder from work or a message from the school. But when she looked at the screen, she froze. There were dozens of messages, texts, notifications, and missed calls. Her heart skipped a beat. She opened one message after another. "Lena, is that you in the video? You were amazing last night. You need to check social media right now." She sat up quickly, still half asleep, trying to understand what was happening. Then she opened her phone's browser. The first thing she saw was a video of herself, her performance from last night. Someone had recorded it and uploaded it online. The title said, "The Girl They Laughed At, But Listened to Her Play." Lena's mouth fell open slightly. The video had already reached thousands of views overnight. Comments were pouring in from people all over the place. This gave me chills. "She plays with so much emotion. Who is she? Someone find her." Her hands trembled as she scrolled. It didn't feel real. Just last night, she had been the quiet girl everyone ignored. Now strangers were calling her inspiring. A few minutes later, she received a call from Mr. Hampton, the piano instructor. "Lena, have you seen the video?" he asked, his voice filled with surprise and excitement. "Yes," she said softly. "I don't know who posted it." "Well, whoever did, they've done you a favor," he said. "People are talking about you everywhere. Even one of the judges from last night called me this morning. They said you reminded them what real music feels like." Lena didn't know what to say. I just played from my heart." "And that's exactly why it worked," he said. "There's something special about you, Lena. I think this is only the beginning." After the call ended, she sat quietly for a long time. The room felt too small for the feelings running through her. She had never imagined something like this could happen to her. Later that day, when she went to her job at the school, things were different. People she used to pass by without a glance now smiled at her. Some of the same students who had laughed before came up to her in the hallway. "You were amazing, Lena," one of them said awkwardly. "I didn't know you could play like that." She smiled politely. "Thank you," another student added. "You made me cry last night. My mom watched the video and said she hasn't heard music like that in years." Their words felt strange to her. Not bad, just unexpected. For so long she had lived unnoticed, and now everyone suddenly wanted to talk to her. She wasn't used to it. When she walked past the music room, she heard a few students playing the same song she had performed. They were trying to copy her melody. She stopped at the door and listened quietly. It felt surreal. Mr. Hampton noticed her standing there and motioned her to come in. "They're all trying to learn your piece," he said with a smile. "You've started something here." Lena looked around. The students smiled shyly, and one of them said, "We can't play it like you do, though." "Yours sounded alive," she laughed softly. "It's not about playing it perfectly," she said. "It's about feeling what the song means to you." From that day, everything began to change slowly. More people started watching her performance online. Local newspapers wrote about her, calling her the girl with the piano soul. A few days later, she received an email from a nearby city's music academy. They had seen her video and wanted to invite her for a small concert. They even offered to pay her for the performance. Lena stared at the message for a long time, unsure if it was real. She had never been paid to play before. She showed the message to Mr. Hampton, who read it twice and smiled. "This is a big opportunity," he said. "You should go. You've earned it." "But I've never played in a real concert," Lena said nervously. "What if I make mistakes?" He shook his head. "Everyone makes mistakes. But people don't remember mistakes, they remember emotion. You have that gift. Don't waste it." His words stayed in her mind all day. That evening, when the hall was empty again, she sat at the piano and played softly. The same old piano she had cleaned for months. She touched the keys like greeting an old friend. She imagined her mother sitting beside her, listening. "What do you think, Mama?" she whispered. "Should I go?" The silence that followed felt peaceful, almost like an answer. The next week, Lena traveled to the city for the concert. It was the first time she had ever been invited somewhere for her music. The hall was much larger than the one in her town, with shining lights and a polished grand piano that looked new. As she waited backstage, the same nervous feeling returned. She looked around at the other performers, confident, well-dressed musicians who seemed to belong here. She clutched her pendant tightly, reminding herself why she had come. When her name was called, she walked out slowly. The lights felt blinding at first, and her heartbeat was loud in her ears. But then she sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. The moment she started playing, the nerves melted away. The sound filled the hall, gentle, deep, and full of emotion. The melody was the same one she had played before, but it felt different here, stronger, freer. The audience listened in complete silence. Some leaned forward, drawn in by the way her music seemed to speak without words. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. A woman from the academy came up to her afterward and said, "You have something rare, Lena. You play like someone who's lived 1,000 stories." Lena smiled shyly. "I just play what I feel." "Keep doing that," the woman said. "The world needs it." That night, Lena stayed in a small hotel room the academy had booked for her. She couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how far she had come, from cleaning the same hall where she used to practice alone, to now performing in front of hundreds of people who came just to listen. She looked out of the window at the city lights and whispered, "I hope you're proud of me, Mama." In the days that followed, more opportunities came. A local radio station invited her for an interview. A small newspaper published her story, focusing on her humble beginnings and her love for her late mother. People began recognizing her in public, asking her about her music, but through all of it, Lena stayed the same. She still worked her cleaning job. She still came back to the same piano every evening. Fame didn't change her. It only gave her more courage to play. One evening, when she returned to the school, she found a small crowd gathered in the hallway. Students, teachers, even some parents were there. They were waiting for her. "Play for us, Lena," someone said softly. She hesitated, then smiled and sat down at the piano. The hall grew quiet. Her fingers began to move gently across the keys, and the familiar melody filled the air once more. This time, as she played, she could feel something new, a connection. The people listening weren't judging her anymore. They were feeling her story, her struggle, her love. When she finished, the room filled with quiet applause, not loud or forced, but genuine. Mr. Hampton stepped forward, his eyes soft. "Lena," he said, "you've reminded us what music really is. It's not about perfection. It's about heart, she smiled. That's what my mother used to say too. That night, as she locked up the hall and turned off the lights, she stood for a moment in front of the piano. Her reflection glimmered faintly on its black surface. It wasn't just an instrument anymore. It was her memory, her voice, and her connection to the one person who had believed in her before anyone else did. She whispered one last time before leaving, "Thank you for everything." Then she walked out into the night, her steps calm and steady. The world outside felt larger now, filled with possibility. For the first time, she didn't feel like the quiet girl in the background. She felt like someone who belonged. And deep in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning of her journey. Lena's life had slowly begun to change, but she didn't notice it all at once. What had started as a single performance in a small town had now become something bigger than she ever imagined. Her story had touched people's hearts. Every few days, she received letters and emails from strangers around the world who said her music had comforted them in hard times. Some wrote that her piano playing reminded them of their parents. Others said it gave them hope to keep following their dreams. She read every message carefully, sometimes with tears in her eyes. But with all the love also came attention, and attention brought new challenges. One afternoon, Lena was cleaning the hallway of the school when the principal called her into the office. She walked in nervously, wondering if she had done something wrong. The principal smiled warmly. "Lena, I have some exciting news," he said. "The city's music foundation wants to sponsor your next performance. They've heard about your story and want to help you record your own album." She blinked in disbelief. "An album?" "Yes," he said. "They'll provide a studio, equipment, and even a professional producer. It's a big step forward for your career." Lena didn't know what to say. The word career sounded strange to her. She had never thought of her music as a career. It was something she did from the heart. Still, she agreed to meet the people from the foundation. A few days later, she found herself sitting in a large glass office in the city. The walls were filled with photos of famous musicians, and the air smelled of coffee and fresh paper. Across the table sat two people, a well-dressed woman with sharp eyes and a man holding a tablet. The woman smiled at her politely. "Lena, your story has captured a lot of attention," she said. "You're talented, and people love what you represent. Humility, emotion, and hope. That's exactly what music needs right now." Lena smiled shyly. "Thank you, ma'am. I just play what I feel." "That's perfect," the woman said quickly. "We want to build your image around that. A simple girl with a golden heart and a powerful story. If we do it right, you could become very well known." The man nodded. "We'll arrange interviews, photo shoots, maybe even a small tour. But we'll need to adjust a few things. We'll pick your songs carefully and polish your image a bit." Lena listened quietly, trying to understand. "What do you mean by adjust?" The woman leaned forward. "We'll guide you. Your story is inspiring, but we want people to see you as more than just a sad background. We want glamour, confidence, something that sells." Lena hesitated. "I don't really care about selling. I just want people to feel my music." The woman paused for a second, then smiled again, a little too wide. "Of course, dear. That's what makes you special. But to reach more hearts, we have to reach more eyes too. You understand, don't you?" Lena nodded slowly, though she wasn't sure she did. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. She began recording her songs in a studio. There were bright lights, microphones, and people constantly giving her advice. How to sit, how to smile, even how to breathe between notes. It felt strange. She missed the quiet of the school hall where only the sound of her piano filled the air. Here, everything was loud. Machines, cameras, and voices telling her what to do. One day, after a long recording session, she sat alone in the corner of the studio. The man in charge of sound came up to her and said, "You did great today, Lena, but you seem tired." She smiled weakly. "I am. It feels different here." "It's not like before." He nodded knowingly. "That's how it always starts. Just don't lose what made you special. People don't fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with honesty." His words stayed in her mind. A few weeks later, her first song was officially released online. The foundation promoted it everywhere. Posters, interviews, and short clips on social media. Her face appeared on local magazines and websites. People called her the piano girl who came from nothing. At first, it felt exciting. Every time she walked down the street, someone recognized her. Some asked for autographs, others wanted photos. But slowly, the attention began to feel heavier. Some people online started making cruel comments. They said things like, "She's not that talented," or "She's only famous because of her story." A few even accused her of pretending to be poor to gain sympathy. Lena read those comments late at night, her eyes stinging with tears. She wanted to tell them it wasn't true, but she didn't. She knew there was no point. She closed her laptop and whispered, "I didn't do this for fame. I just wanted to play." Her heart felt heavy for days. She stopped checking her phone and spent more time at the old piano in the school hall. The janitor, who had always supported her, noticed her quietness. "You look troubled," he said one evening as she finished playing. She sighed. "Everything feels too big now. I wanted my music to make people happy, but now it feels like noise." "Everyone wants to change me," he smiled softly. "Fame can make people forget why they started. But not you. You know your reason, don't you?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, I play for my mother." "Then play for her," he said. "Not for them." That night, Lena stayed longer than usual. The hall was empty, the lights dim. She played the song she had written years ago, the one her mother loved the most. Every note seemed to calm her heart. A few days later, she was invited to perform again at the city's annual charity gala. It was a big event attended by important people, artists, business owners, and even a few politicians. The foundation was thrilled. They told her this could open even more doors. When she arrived at the event, the place looked stunning. Golden lights hung from the ceiling, and people dressed in elegant clothes filled the room. Lena felt small among them. She wore a simple white dress and carried her pendant around her neck. As she waited backstage, she overheard two people talking nearby. "She's the girl from that viral video, right?" one said. "Yes," the other replied. "Let's see if she can actually play or if it was just luck." The old feeling of fear crept back into her chest. For a moment, she thought about walking away. But then she remembered what the janitor had told her. Play for her, not for them. When it was her turn, she walked to the stage. The lights were bright and the audience was silent. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and touched the keys. The sound that filled the room was gentle and pure, just like before. She didn't think about the cameras or the people watching. She thought about her mother's smile, her old apartment, the nights she practiced alone. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who cleaned the floors before touching the piano keys. The music carried all of it. When the last note faded, there was silence. Then the applause came, loud, strong, and real. People stood up, clapping with admiration. Lena opened her eyes and smiled softly. She wasn't nervous anymore. She wasn't chasing fame or approval. She had found herself again through her music. After the show, several people came to congratulate her. One elderly man said, "Your music doesn't just sound beautiful, it feels alive. Don't let anyone take that from you." On her way home, she looked out the car window at the city lights. She didn't feel like a celebrity. She felt like a girl who had shared her heart. And somehow that was enough. That night she wrote in her notebook, "People will talk, and they will forget. But music, real music, stays. As long as I play with love, I'll never lose my way." She closed the notebook and smiled. Somewhere deep inside, she knew her mother would be proud. The following weeks were full of surprises for Lena. Her life had shifted in ways she could hardly imagine, and yet she tried to hold on to the quiet strength that had always guided her. She kept playing her piano, whether it was in the school hall, at the studio, or in her small apartment late at night. Every note reminded her of why she started. One afternoon, she received an unexpected invitation. An important philanthropist in the city had heard her music online and wanted to meet her. He was known for supporting young talents and artists from humble backgrounds. Lena didn't know much about him, except that he had the power to open doors she could not reach on her own. When she arrived at his office, it was larger and more luxurious than anything she had ever seen. Tall windows let in the afternoon sunlight, illuminating shelves filled with books, awards, and photographs of people he had helped over the years. The philanthropist himself was sitting behind a massive desk. He stood up and greeted her with a warm smile. "I've watched your performance video," he said. "It's rare to find someone whose music carries such honesty and emotion." It moved me deeply. Lena felt her cheeks grow warm. "Thank you, sir. I just play what I feel." "That's exactly why it works," he said. "I want to help you reach a larger audience. Not for fame or money, but so your music can touch even more lives." She hesitated. She had been offered support before. but she always worried it might change her music, change her heart. I'm not sure, she said. I don't want to lose what makes my music mine. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. That is my hope too. I want to guide, not control. I've seen too many talented artists lose themselves chasing attention. I believe you can stay true while sharing your gift with the world. They talked for a long time that day. He offered to fund her concerts, arrange professional recordings, and even provide her with a mentor who had worked with renowned musicians. Lena listened quietly, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time, she realized her music could really reach beyond her small town. Over the next few weeks, her schedule changed completely. She began preparing for a series of performances in different cities. Each place had large halls, professional pianos, and audiences eager to see her. While the foundation continued promoting her, the philanthropist provided quiet support, encouraging her without pushing her to change who she was. The day of her first city concert arrived. Lena felt the familiar nerves, but this time there was something different. She understood that no matter how large the audience or how critical the judges, her music had a voice stronger than fear. Backstage, she saw the crowd gathering through the curtains. Hundreds of people were coming, some of them strangers who had heard her video online, others invited by the philanthropist. Her heart pounded as she adjusted her dress and placed her mother's pendant around her neck. When her name was called, she walked out to the stage. The bright lights made the room look enormous, but she didn't falter. She sat at the grand piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. The notes rose softly at first, gentle and familiar. Then the melody grew stronger, filling every corner of the hall. Each note carried memories of her past, her mother's guidance, her struggles, and her triumphs. It was a story without words, a language only the heart could understand. The audience was silent at first, mesmerized. Some leaned forward as if trying to catch every detail. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Lena didn't notice anything but the keys beneath her fingers and the story she was telling. As she played, a man in the front row caught her attention. He had kind eyes and his posture was tense, as if holding back emotion. He didn't look like someone who usually attended concerts. His expression softened as he listened, and Lena felt something shift in the air around her. She couldn't explain it, but she sensed that her music was reaching him in a profound way. By the time the last note faded, the hall erupted in applause. Lena stood and bowed, feeling a strange mix of relief and fulfillment. She didn't think about the audience's approval. She only felt the connection that had been created through her music. After the concert, the philanthropist approached her with a proud smile. "You see," he said, "music doesn't just entertain, it touches souls." That evening, as she returned to her hotel, the man from the front row approached her. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to meet you. Your music, it reminded me of my daughter." Lena's eyes widened slightly. "Your daughter?" she asked gently. He nodded. "She passed away a few years ago. I haven't felt her presence in a long time. But tonight, listening to you, it was like she was there again. Your music carries something rare, something real." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Don't apologize. You've given me a gift I didn't expect. Thank you." That moment stayed with her. She realized that her music could reach people in ways she had never imagined. It could heal, comfort, and remind them of love they thought they had lost. In the following weeks, Lena traveled to more cities, performing at halls, small theaters, and charity events. Every time she played, she felt the same connection. The audience silent, hearts attentive, eyes glistening. She began to understand that her music wasn't about her fear or her background. It was about giving people a chance to feel what she felt, to connect with emotions they sometimes couldn't express. Yet, the journey wasn't easy. With every concert, there were new pressures, interviews, schedules, and the constant reminder from some people that she needed to polish her image, dress differently, or play more complicated pieces. Some nights she returned to her hotel exhausted, her hands sore, and wondered if it was all worth it. But then she remembered the janitor's advice. Play for her, not for them, and so she did. One evening after a long tour, she returned home. The familiar streets and quiet halls welcomed her like old friends. She unlocked the school music room and sat at her old piano. The sound filled the empty hall, pure and unbroken. She played the song she had written for her mother, the one that had started everything. This time it felt different, stronger, free. Her journey had changed her, but the heart of her music remained the same. Afterward, she sat quietly, thinking about all the people she had met, the strangers whose tears she had seen, the philanthropist who believed in her, the father who had felt his daughter through her notes. Each story reminded her that music was bigger than her. It was a bridge between souls, a language no words could replace. Her phone buzzed with another message, this time from the philanthropist. "You are changing lives, Lena. Keep playing. Keep being true." She smiled and looked at the piano keys in front of her. She had begun this journey alone, unsure if anyone would ever listen. Now the world was listening, and she had learned that true music comes from the heart, untouched by fear, untouched by fame. Lena whispered softly to herself, "We're just getting started." Mama, for the first time, she truly believed it. The months that followed were a whirlwind for Lena. She traveled to different cities, performed in grand halls, and shared her music with thousands of people. Yet despite the excitement, she never let herself forget where she had come from. Every time she sat at a piano, whether it was a grand concert instrument or the old-school hall piano, she played with the same heart, the same honesty that had always been her guiding light. One evening, Lena returned home after a long tour. The streets of her town were quiet, and the familiar buildings seemed smaller than she remembered. She walked slowly, savoring the peace. There were no cameras, no schedules, no people waiting to tell her what to do. Just silence, the kind that allowed her to think and breathe. When she arrived at the school, she found the music room empty. The piano gleamed under the soft evening light. She sat down, her fingers lightly touching the keys. The first notes sounded hesitant at first, but then they grew into the melody that had carried her through so many nights. As she played, she felt the journey of the past months pass through her hands. The fear, the doubts, the applause, the letters from strangers, the father who had felt his daughter again through her music. Every note reminded her that music was more than performance. It was connection, healing, and memory. After finishing, she rested her hands and leaned back, closing her eyes. She thought about the people she had met, the lives she had touched, and the story that had started with her simply playing alone in the corner of a room. It seemed impossible to believe that just months ago she had been ignored, laughed at, and overlooked. But then she remembered the first time she played in front of an audience. The whispers, the laughter, and the quiet moment when she had closed her eyes and played anyway. That choice had changed everything. It had started a journey that went far beyond what she could have imagined. The next morning, Lena received a letter in the mail. It was unusual in the age of emails, and it made her curious. She opened it carefully. Inside was an invitation to perform at an international music festival. It was one of the largest events for young musicians, held in a city famous for its classical music history. Performers from all over the world would be there. At first, Lena hesitated. The idea of standing on such a stage in front of people she had never seen filled her with nerves. She thought of the journey so far, the applause, the recognition, the growing attention, and wondered if she could handle it. Then she remembered her mother's words, the ones she had carried in her heart since she was a little girl. "Play like your heart is speaking, not your hands." She smiled softly. She would go. Weeks later, she arrived at the festival. The city was alive with music. Street performers played melodies from corners. People hurried past with programs in their hands, and banners with the festival's name waved in the wind. Lena felt a mixture of excitement and fear as she walked through the crowd. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. Young musicians tuned their instruments, teachers whispered advice, and festival organizers moved quickly from place to place. Lena felt small among the energy, but she reminded herself of the reason she was here, not to compete, not to prove herself, but to share her music. When it was finally her turn, she walked to the stage. The lights were blinding, the hall filled with thousands of people waiting silently. She sat at the grand piano and took a deep breath. The first notes were soft, trembling slightly as her nerves tried to catch her. Then she closed her eyes and the melody poured out naturally. It wasn't about showing skill or impressing anyone. It was about feeling, about remembering her mother, about connecting with everyone listening. The music flowed like a river, carrying the story of her life, her struggles, her fear, her love, her triumphs. She could feel the audience leaning in, hearts listening closely. Some faces were tense with concentration, others wet with tears. She didn't need to see their reactions. She only needed to play. When the last note faded, the hall was silent for a heartbeat and then erupted into thunderous applause. People stood clapping, some cheering, some crying quietly. Lena opened her eyes and saw the faces of strangers transformed by her music. It was overwhelming, yet it felt familiar, just like the first time she had played and felt seen. After the performance, a few organizers came backstage to congratulate her. One of them, a man with kind eyes, said, "You have something very rare. You play not just with your hands, but with your heart. That is why people connect with you." Lena smiled softly. "I just play what I feel." "Then keep feeling it," he said. "You remind people that music is alive, not just notes on a page." The next day she wandered through the city, reflecting on everything. She had come far, from a small apartment and quiet practice sessions to stages she had only dreamed about. But she realized that it wasn't the stages or the applause that mattered. It was the music itself, and the lives it touched along the way. Later that week, Lena was invited to perform at a charity event organized by the festival. The room was filled with influential people, philanthropists and artists from around the world. She felt a little nervous again, but the moment she sat at the piano, those feelings vanished. She began to play. This time the music was more confident, more expressive, as if every concert, every person she had touched had given her strength. The audience listened, captivated. Tears glistened on some faces while others sat quietly, completely absorbed. When the final note faded, the applause was overwhelming. Lena stood and bowed, feeling a warmth in her chest she had never felt before. For the first time, she understood that her music wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who heard it, who felt it, who remembered love through it. Later that evening, she met a young girl waiting outside her dressing room. The girl was shy, holding a small notebook in her hands. I wanted to say thank you," the girl whispered. "I've been learning piano and I've never felt confident before. But your music, it made me believe I could." Lena knelt down to the girl's level. "That's wonderful," she said softly. "Keep playing. Play what you feel, not what anyone else expects." The girl smiled, and Lena realized that this was what mattered most: the music inspiring others, giving courage and spreading hope. A few weeks later, Lena returned home. The tour had ended, the festivals were over, and she was back in her quiet town. She walked past the familiar streets, the old buildings, and finally into the school music room. The piano sat waiting, as if it had never left. She sat down and played the song she had written for her mother, the one that had started everything. This time the music felt complete. It carried the weight of her journey, the fear, the laughter, the applause, the letters, the lives touched, and the love she had shared. When she finished, she leaned back and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. She had begun as a girl playing alone in a corner, laughed at by those who didn't see her. Now she had touched hearts across cities, inspired strangers, and found her voice in a world that had once ignored her. She whispered softly to the empty room, "We did it, Mama." Outside, the world continued as always. People walked, cars passed, and the sun slowly set over the town. But inside, Lena felt a quiet triumph, a sense of belonging she had never known. She wasn't famous because of herself. She was recognized because she had stayed true to her music, her heart, and the memory of the one who had taught her to believe in herself. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "Music is more than notes. It's hope, love, memory, and courage. If I keep playing with heart, I will never be alone. And maybe, just maybe, I can help others find their voices too." She closed the notebook, touched the pendant around her neck, and smiled. Her journey had been long, full of challenges, but it had brought her exactly where she needed to be. For the first time, Lena felt completely certain. No matter what the future held, fame, recognition, or quiet evenings alone, she would always play for what mattered most: the music, the hearts it touched, and the love she carried within. And in that certainty, she found joy, peace, and the true meaning of her gift. The journey had begun in silence, but it had ended in harmony. Lena's story was no longer about the girl who was laughed at. It was about the girl who never gave up, who played with heart, and who reminded the world that music could heal, connect, and inspire, even in the quietest of souls.